Lovely. Well, I think we'll get started just because I know we have the second workshop this afternoon as well, so we don't want to have any delays going there. But we're very excited today to have Jimi Slattery working with us this afternoon, delivering this workshop and talking about how compassion matters. Now, Jimi is the Executive Director at the Dalai Lama Center for Compassion and runs the organization's education project, Compassion Matters. Their aim is to create a kinder and happier society by inspiring children and adults to lead compassionate lives. We are very much looking forward to hearing all about this workshop. Thank you very much, Jimi, and I'll hand straight over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm wondering if I can be as professional as Faye was during the rest of the afternoon. Hi, everyone. I hope this, there are lots of upsides to doing things on Google Meets, but the downside is that I don't get to see you, and we don't get to interact so much. But I would encourage anyone who has any questions, who wants to make a comment during the session, to pop a message. So there's like a little text message looking box on the side, and you can send a message or ask a question. Please do, if you need anything clarifying or you want to contribute in any way. It will make this a little bit more interactive and a bit less of me talking the whole time. So I wanted to talk a little bit today about a movement called Compassion Education, and a couple of projects that we run in the US and the UK, which kind of explore that area of work. And I'll talk a little bit about the research behind it, why we do it, what the goals are of it, and give you some practical takeaway things as well, so that you can use them in your day-to-day. And then there'll be some things that you can go on and explore in a bit more detail if you want to as well. So what I'll do is now I'll pop up my presentation. I've put in some videos that we took recently with teachers both here and in the US, so a bit of a break from me talking as well. So I hope that works for you. Let's see if I can make this work. Right. Can everyone see my presentation? Is that from the beginning? Okay. Can everyone see that? Okay.
Yeah. I can't see it yet, but I don't know if that's just me. There we go. It's coming on now.
Is that working now, Faye?
Yeah, it's coming on now.
Okay. Should have a big screen saying "Make compassion a habit." I hope that's worked. So my interest and reason for being involved in this area of work is I've taught meditation to children for about 10 years, and both under a more traditional form of meditation and also in the form of mindfulness. I've taught about 15,000 children, and my interest in that area came from when I was in my early 20s. I lived in a Buddhist monastery for nearly 2 years, and whilst there I saw the benefit of meditation just to myself, but also to the children who were taking part in that, and thought, wow, this would be a really amazing thing to teach to our children. There's lots of really beneficial things they could get from this. And then mindfulness exploded as a way for children to engage in this type of activity, and it really went from being a very niche thing that kind of maybe slightly alternative thinkers were doing, to being a very mainstream thing, and to being something that's advocated by the NHS as a treatment for depression, which is amazing. And really, I think compassion education is an extension of that. It's something that can work alongside mindfulness, and it can benefit children, and it can enhance the work that mindfulness does. And I hope I can explain that in a bit more detail as I go through. I don't know if all of you know what compassion is. I think we have an innate sense of what it what makes it up, but compassion is the bedrock of our project in many different forms, and it's quite a complex thing. And often people ask me, what's the difference between kindness and compassion? And kindness is the outcome of compassion. It's the action. Whereas compassion involves a lot more things going on. So for me, compassion, which was explained really well to me by a gentleman in Northern Ireland a few years ago, is the awareness to see someone suffering, deciding to do something about that suffering, and doing it. So going out there and trying to alleviate that suffering in the world. But compassion also involves a number of other things. So some of you might have heard of self-compassion, this idea that you have to take care of yourself, that you have to show kindness to yourself. And that is really critical for me. There are so many of us with very negative inner dialogues going on. There are many children whose self-confidence is very low and self-esteem very low because they're not showing themselves enough care. They might have very standards which are extremely high that they can never meet. They might not have built realistic frameworks for success for themselves. Compassion for others is at the very core of what we do. We talk a lot about interconnectedness, how you can work with each other, and how that is a true route to happiness and well-being. And even compassion for nature and animals. So how we connect with the wider world around us and the systems, and how we fit into society, our sense of purpose as well. All of these things kind of intersect with compassion. But we believe that compassion offers an opportunity to make a positive change, not only for our own well-being, but also our relationship with others and the connections we make with society. There are a few misconceptions about compassion that I really like to dispel at the beginning. Some people think compassion is a kind of being soft, or being kind of having a very passive view of the world. But actually our patron, the Dalai Lama, one of the things he talks about is a courageous compassion, and also a compassion that can be fierce. So if you really, really have a conviction about something, and I think you only have to look at young people who are standing up for climate justice at the moment, and the passion behind what they do, that is fierce compassion in action. And I really like that phrase. I think it dispels the idea that this is all about being nicey nice to each other. This is about caring for each other and standing up for what's right as well. And being just, and justice is also a massive part of compassion, because if we're going to stand up against what's wrong, or what we perceive to be wrong in the world, we have to have a drive and a fire to do that. So I got involved in the project because one of my other things that I do is that I'm a trainee psychotherapist. I'm very interested in children's well-being, their mental health. My sense is that compassion is a missing element within many young people's lives, and especially a focus externally on the compassion of others and the development of healthy relationships. And that actually plays a huge role in young people's suffering in terms of their mental well-being. As we all know, mental health is an absolutely huge issue for young people in the UK. And the really concerning thing for me, especially having spent time studying child psychology in a great more detail, is that the impact this can have not just on children's happiness now, but also their cognitive development and the way they develop relationships and other things to do with their mental well-being into the future and into their adulthood. I think one of the really wonderful things over the last few years, looking very positively, is that we have a greater awareness of these things now. It is very high on the agenda, but that's slightly curtailed by frustration that we're not doing enough. I think we talk about mental health a lot, which is a huge change from when I was a young person. But the frustration is there need to be tools that we can give young people to help them to manage the challenges that they'll face in the world. And we're not doing that enough. And that's both in terms of really kind of at the sharp end services like counselling, but also things like what I'm going to talk about today. So things that are given to everyone, skills and tools that are provided to all children they're proactive things that they can learn throughout their time at school or throughout their childhood that they can unpack and use during their childhood to help them manage some of the more difficult challenges they'll face, or even just the day-to-day challenges they come across, and that will help them flourish later in their life. So for me, compassion is really a tool for increasing young people's well-being. And the amazing thing about increasing their well-being is it does lots of other wonderful things for them as well, including improving their academic performance. And there's lots of research about those two things intersecting. So there are three main things which are the goals for compassion education, and they are awareness, compassion, surprisingly, and engagement. So what we look for in students is for them to gain a greater first-person attentiveness and awareness of their own thoughts and feelings. We give them lots of activities to do that. And we also look for them to gain a greater awareness of others and their mental lives. And what we mean by that is what might be going on in their head, in other people's head, as they relate to them. We ask them to develop a great awareness of interdependence, so their relationships with others, and appreciating that that's a really massive part of what it means to be a human being. Because in our current society, so much of what we do is focused on independence and us being individuals, including the well-being movement, actually, which is hugely about individualism. But for us, we have to put a balance that it's really important to look after yourself and be aware of yourself and have a sense of self-purpose. But if that sits exclusively to wider society, then there are a number of things that happen, including a sense of alienation, kind of a mispurposing, kind of a subversion of some ideals. So it's really important that this awareness sits within both a societal and an individual kind of plane. Compassion, which I mentioned a bit earlier, so that's self-compassion, that's learning to look after yourself, learning to take care of your mental and physical well-being. Compassion for others, and that's we hopefully inspire children to do and give them ideas for doing lots of things, both within their school and wider community and within their friendship groups. And then we talk about common human values everywhere. So I suppose a bit of that is internationalism, and thinking about what people from different communities think about and why it might be different to ourselves, and why that's happened, and appreciation for people all around the world. And finally, engagement is about children developing an increasingly sophisticated level of self-regulation skills. So being able to look at their behavior in quite a scientific way and seeing that it's beneficial to themselves and others, which behavior is beneficial and which is not, and their ability to relate in a caring way to others. And also, I suppose, in terms of community engagement, thinking about how they can effectively and confidently go out into the world on a community and hopefully global level, and build a real positive benefit for wider society. So at the end of the day, these 9 squares which are here, all kind of fulfill this awareness, compassion, engagement goal that we're looking for in both of our compassion education projects. And what that means practically is that children will learn a number of things. We hope that they'll have a more positive outlook and they'll be resilient. Resiliency is a huge buzzword, but actually practically achieving that is quite complex. But projects that we've built are very focused on that, so that children can really bounce back from the challenges that they face in their lives. I think emotional literacy and awareness is incredibly important, being able to be aware of why certain things are happening in their minds and in their lives, and why they might be acting in a certain way because of those things. And as I mentioned earlier, this is all a useful extension to mindfulness as well. We spend a lot of time talking with schools about values, so things like kindness and forgiveness, and weaving these into the curriculum is often challenging for schools. But what our projects offer is the opportunity to gauge with these ideas across the whole of their curriculum. So not just giving a thing that you can do for 1 hour a week, but but little things that you can put into your English lessons or into assembly or into maths, and these ideas can really permeate. So if a school, has as one of their school values, we're a school, we're focused on compassion, or we're a kindness first school, then this can be delivered across the whole school. It's really important, I think, to have those values within a school, and within any educational organisation. And we want children to explore those experiences and think about how to approach those ideas thoughtfully and confidently. And finally, I suppose on my list here is ethical discernment and critical thinking, which we think are really, really important skills, especially for children who are exploring these ideas in greater depth. So I think a really good example of this is happiness, which is really, for me, of this project is a thing. I meet lots of people and their end goal is to be happy. But how much do we think about happiness and what makes us happy, and how that works, and would it be okay to be happy all the time? Is that a healthy thing? And that perhaps sometimes suffering is whilst an unpleasant thing, is part of the human experience. And we like to think about these things with children because we think they're really important things to unpack. And often we don't make space for that. We might talk about the practicalities of things, but we don't make space to really think about, what it means to be happy. What's the difference between taking a risk and being courageous? What's wisdom and what's knowledge? These things are really important for children to understand the world around them. And we have a great depth of knowledge about these things that goes right back to ancient Greece. So we should take advantage of it. I'm going to talk a little bit about the two projects that we're currently using to explore these things with children. So the first is called Sea Learning, and it stands for Social, Emotional and Ethical Learning. This is a project which has been developed over the last 5 years in Atlanta at Emory University in the US, and it was formally launched in April last year. The project is born of a collaboration of several fields, including social and emotional learning, which is most schools in America have a requirement to teach social and emotional learning. There's a huge depth of research in that area in the US, and it's been a main part of the curriculum there for about 15 years. Contemplative sciences, so this is things like reflection and self-reflection. Trauma-informed learning, so putting trauma at the very front of the development of this project has been really important in terms of ensuring children, regardless of their background, can participate in a safe way. And also taking some of the practices from trauma-informed learning and inserting them into the project has been really beneficial in terms of children developing proactive skills to manage some of the more challenging emotions. And educational and development psychologists have also taken part. And the aim of all of these experts coming together was to create a project that would enable teachers and students from across the world to participate in the programme and help them develop skills for their own well-being. The project is working in in 18 countries at the moment. It's making huge strides in India as well as in the US. We're looking to launch this project in the UK in the new year. We're currently piloting it with 3 or 4 schools here in different ways to learn about how it works in the UK and some adaptations we might have to make some of the materials. And the materials are available from the youngest age that can participate is 6 years old, and the oldest is 21. So there are 4 curriculums for the different stages, key stages. So there is huge potential here for a project that can take children all the way through their educational journey, reinforcing these messages and skills about emotional literacy and well-being. But I thought you can have a break from listening to me for 5 minutes, and I'll pop on just a short video just with some students from one of the US colleges who participated in this program. And I think they're 17-year-olds, and they're just talking about what they've learned over the last few weeks.
emotions are not something that you can just turn on and off. That's one thing that I've learned. They're always going to be present. Emotions, you're going to get angry, sad, happy, depressed, whatever.
Emotions aren't like something that we need to be afraid of. They're natural. We're gonna have them, and they're not really any bad emotions or good emotions. Like anger might be perceived as like a bad emotion, but we all have it, and it's a necessary emotion that we need to have. But we just need to understand and learn how to portray or feel each emotion in moderation.
Sometimes I don't control my emotions. Sometimes they just kind of come out. So in relationship to my mind, I'm starting to become like more aware of what my emotions are, taking time to try and process them and see how I can resolve whatever situation I'm in that's making me either happy, sad, angry, upset, anything.
I'm coming to learn that emotions aren't something that just come out of nowhere and like take control of you. We create them ourselves, and so we have the power to not manipulate them, but kind of guide them.
So it's not about like saying, okay, I'm never ever going to be angry. I'm going to constantly be happy. That's just unrealistic, I think. So it's about trying to make these emotions work for you and trying to keep you in a homeostasis state.
So I'm always taken aback by how eloquent the young people who are talking there about their own. Sorry, I got a very squeaky chair. The young people there who are talking about their emotional well-being in such an eloquent way. It's massively inspiring. So that's some of the participants in our SEAL project who are slightly older, although as I say, the project goes down right to 6-year-olds. I want to talk a little bit about our second project now, which was developed in the UK and is a UK-based project called Compassion Matters. Compassion Matters is what I've been working on for the last 3 years. It began as its own project, and since about 18 months ago has began to work alongside SEAL Learning, and we've learned so much from working with a much bigger group of researchers and specialists. Our approach was slightly different because we wanted to develop something that was very accessible. So we developed a program that teachers could take and insert into their PHSE program. The project is primarily for 10 to 14-year-olds, although it is used with a much wider range of children. But it was at first developed just for that stage where children were progressing in from primary school into secondary school. And our project started off as primarily an ethical project and has grown since then into a project that encompasses some more well-being practices as well, which are integrated into the program. Our film is slightly more multimedia, so we have films and presentations as well as lesson plans and activities, and some audio guidance as well that we include. These are some of the slides from some of the work that we do. So we offer children practically the opportunity to engage with things like, what do you think happiness would mean, and to have class discussions and to guide the teacher through that. We have audio so children can sit down and do compassion meditation, which is practicing thinking compassionately, because there's lots of research about if we practice thinking compassionately, we can form our minds into being kinder. And yeah, there's a huge number of examples, and we focus the project on the stories of really inspiring individuals who can show us how to be courageous and how to be compassionate and kinder in the world. Hopefully real life examples that children can really hang on to, and it will help them unpick something that's sometimes quite complex. And that project is, as with SEAL Learning, they're completely free for schools. All of the resources are free. We offer training as well for schools who require that, and we're quite happy to come to your school or do something, probably in the near future, do something a bit more like this, which is online. But we've worked with Compassion Matters with about 8,000 children in the UK, and we've trained over 100 teachers to teach these lessons. And most schools teach them their PSHE time, but they've also been used in personal development time and with it as an extracurricular activity, and also used in some schools in a cross-curricular way. So there's a huge range of ways it's been used. I'm just going to pop on another video now of some teachers talking about how they use Compassion Matters in their school and what they found taking part in the project.
But definitely in the playground, the pupils have been responding differently to one another, and they've been more mature about their problem solving techniques, and also much more willing to come to adults and seek our help and our advice. So it's given them different tools just to speak about their own feelings and emotions, which I think has been really good.
So the great reward from this program is we have seen a change. It really has become a positive force.
So there were two of the teachers at one of the schools that we worked with over the last few years who we were really delighted. They were having lots of challenges with children specifically being really unkind to each other, and just low level unkindness, and that really settling as a kind of overwhelming almost norm within a certain year group. And we worked with them to develop some practical ways, as well as going through some of our curriculum to try and unpick that a little bit, because it can really set in sometimes, and whilst it can be quite a low level thing, it can begin to really influence the classroom and the teacher's relationship with the class, and everyone being dissatisfied. And there's a way there for us to work with them to help change that towards a culture of kindness first, and that's been a wonderful success we've had. I won't go through the research in depth, but some of the bigger, both these projects are based on a social emotional learning framework, and as I said earlier, that's been a really decent amount of research over the last 15 years. And there's been some fantastic research which has been done across all of the individual research projects by an organisation called CASEL, which is the Collaborative Association for Social Emotional Learning, and they found things. Some things which are outlined here, such as improves 11% improvement in academic success. There's other findings, such as there's long-term gain in terms of lessening of antisocial behaviour, and things such as cultivating these basic human values can basically help pro-social behaviour in general, but also help bolster communities. So lots of positive things going on in communities because adults and children have taken part in these activities. There's some research into this in the UK as well, such as at the Education Endowment Foundation, that found that social emotional learning interventions that almost always perceived to improve emotional and attitudinal outcomes, which is that's what you want fundamentally, is a positive change to children's emotional and attitudinal outcomes. I think one of the really interesting things about this, and one of the drivers between why I've become involved with this, I was originally an educational researcher at Oxford University, and I was really interested in social emotional learning, because for me there was lots of excellent teaching going on in the classroom, but actually the thing that was lacking was the ability of some children to engage with school in a really positive way, from being able to regulate their emotions so that they can make it through the day without having a huge blast of emotions, to being able to regulate themselves and bring themselves down after lunchtime so that they could sit still again, to being able to just have a consistent emotional base during the day, be in that zone where they could concentrate and really do their best, and instead they were maybe a bit tumultuous. And for me, I always felt that social emotional learning was something that was tacked onto the side, like, oh, we'll try and fix these emotions, but academics comes first. And that's been a huge cultural thing within education over the last 15 years, this idea that academic attainment is the pinnacle of what schools should be achieving. But if you don't attend to social emotional learning, I think as importantly, or if not more, before attainment, then you're not going to get students achieving their best. And in fact, you could end up damaging some, because the pressures and the things that we've discovered about having a really attainment first culture puts a huge amount of pressure on young people, and can actually do some really significant damage to their well-being. So for me, I mean, this is my personal opinion, is that, you know, emotional literacy, emotional awareness, and emotional well-being should come first, and should be, you know, if you've got that as a thing that you're working on really well with your students, then the research says that they will naturally be better learners, they'll be more focused, they will enjoy school more because they'll feel more positive about coming to school, and they'll flourish. And I'm a true believer in that, but I am quite biased because I am a trainee psychotherapist. So yeah, that's my field of interest. But I was an educationalist as well. So I've put in some links into the slides that you can go away and have a look at some of the research by yourself if you want. It's really fascinating. And I'm especially interesting is a bit by the World Economic Forum, which was about that children should be learning social emotional learning skills because their jobs are going to change so much in the future. Specializing in something even as early as at undergraduate level is not hugely helpful. That's a fantastic piece which was done there a couple of years ago and well worth reading. So I wanted to chat a little bit more now about the practicalities of doing compassion education in the classroom, things you can take away, and positive things, and how we work it and how it fits into the school curriculum. So first of all, in a sense of where and when, compassion education looks a bit different in every classroom in school, and also after school clubs and organisational settings. And it's important that you really choose an option which, given your school's resources and time constraints, provides an opportunity for you to engage in this in its fullest. So just sticking it in at the end of the day, or doing it once a week and then giving up on it after half a term. Really be realistic and look at what's there. We have schools who do 5 minutes a day, and really commit to that, and that really works for them. We have some schools who do that and they do 2 lessons a week, and they do tutor time, and they do lots of other things, and that's what they chose, and that's what works for them. But really, there's a great importance to ensuring that time is committed. And what I wanted to do was just play you a couple again of short videos of 2 teachers who are talking about how they've implemented it in their school, which I think is really interesting. The first video is a teacher who's teaching across the curriculum in an elementary school in the US. And the second is a subject-specific teacher who teaches English in a high school, with the upper end of the high school, so kind of 17, 18, 19-year-olds, and how she's used it in her everyday kind of work. So I'll pop those on now.
And the idea of taking breaks and doing mindfulness to help.
Sorry, I'll pop her back to the beginning.
Help calm one's body. But also, I have so much joy bringing it into my project-based learning, which is when we integrate our reading, writing, math, science, and social studies curriculums together to kind of do big, meaningful projects with our students. I have had so much fun bringing in this idea of the needs of all people, the things that we share, the needs that we have to be healthy, the needs that we have to live, the needs that we have to learn, and tying that into James Oglethorpe and this idea of prison reform. So that's been really interesting. I also, second grade is a big year for teaching maps and map skills, teaching that with the overlay of interconnectedness. And we looked at climate change and how pollution in one part of the world can still affect other parts of the world because we all share this one planet. And the kids really, really grasped that and understood it. And so being able to take some of those bigger concepts and really tie it into our curriculum has just made my entire classroom richer and my entire teaching experience richer. I am excited for you to now have this great tool to make your classrooms an even better place for your students. So way to go.
And this is our second teacher, who's the high school teacher. she's going to talk specifically about something which is called the resiliency zone, which is one of the skills that we teach children. And very quickly, the idea of this is that you have 3 zones that you can that you're in emotionally, and these are high zone, a low zone, and a kind of middle zone, the resilient zone. We often ask children to check in either at the beginning of the day or the beginning of the lesson, tell us how they're feeling and what zone they're in that day. And it's a tool for them to begin to develop greater emotional literacy and awareness, and practice that every day, but also then to kind of judge where they are and think about maybe a skill that they'd like to apply, or a tool that we've taught them that they can use to get themselves back to that comfortable zone where they can feel ready to learn and at their best, kind of in their best emotional position to learn again. So the teachers here is talking a bit about that.
Hi, my name is Tally Johnson, and I taught high school English for about 10 years in public schools. And then the last 5 years or so, I've been teaching at an independent school, also high school English. So I teach all the way from 9th through 12th graders. And I've been involved with using C-learning in my classroom. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about teaching the resiliency zone. I have found this to be very helpful and students to respond well to it. Certainly, I've found it helpful in my own life and the concept, but also I think my students have found the same, and in the classroom. I think it is tricky with high school. It's important to be genuine and real. And so I think one of the things I find most important is allowing them to be private with it if they want to, that they don't have to share, inviting them to share when they feel comfortable, and also being vulnerable and finding the moments and the situations where I'm willing to share personal examples as well. And I think that that goes a long way in making the students, in allowing the students to see the benefit of what we're teaching them, and also to begin to make connections to their own lives, and then also for me to the literature that we study. So, for example, after we learned about the resiliency zone, I did an activity where we would check in at the beginning of class, and they would just take a moment to reflect on where they were personally, and even a few seconds, even just a few moments, that quiet space to check in with where they were was an awesome reset as they came in to start my class. And then they had drawn the resiliency zone in their notebook, and so they would just put a little mark for where they felt like they were in that moment. And again, they didn't have to share it. Sometimes we would take a few minutes to see if anybody wanted to share if we had the time. I think in the very beginning, the first couple of times we did it. But then over time, as we were studying different things, we could weave this into what we were talking about. So whether we were talking about Hamlet or Macbeth, we could talk about where the character was and what, the character being knocked out of the resiliency zone. The students really enjoyed the temperature words to go along with it, the idea of something happening and being knocked out of the resiliency zone, and the feeling of it boiling, like their emotions boiling or their feelings boiling. And then also the idea, if they were knocked low, that they would feel frozen, or, and then we expanded on different adjectives with sluggish or, different things. They enjoyed that, the language around it. And we also talked about this with, even like microaggressions, and that's something I plan to do going into this school year, and with a lot of awareness around things happening in the world, with experiencing micro.
So I just wanted to stop her there because I'm just conscious of the time. But I think a really good example of how someone's using one of the tools that we use within the classroom in SE learning projects specifically, within a wider curriculum setting. I just wanted to talk about the final kind of bit is about the idea of practically creating this compassionate classroom. So there's an educational theorist called Nell Noddings, and his idea is that to create a caring school environment, educators need to model genuine care themselves. and students need opportunities to practice kindness and caring and compassion for others. And it notably says education shouldn't go through the motions. So I suppose what I'm saying is this is an opportunity for teachers to participate as well, and that was reflected from both the teachers who participated in our CE learning program, that they in those videos that they have seen it as a really beneficial thing for them as well as for their students. When you watch their videos, they talk a lot about how it's really enhanced them. And for me, this is a different approach to learning. It's not about that teacher in the classroom being the main facilitator and being the sage and being the person imparting knowledge. It's about you going on a journey with students, which from my personal experience of doing this in the classroom is a hugely different way of approaching learning, but a really wonderful way to do it. And it builds all sorts of trust and relationships and deepens your relationship with the class in a group of children in a way that is quite difficult to do otherwise. So the other things that we've researched that make these compassionate classroom works, the key characteristics that help children feel a sense of emotional safety and belonging are things like they're comfortable to ask questions. They're in an environment where they're encouraged to make mistakes and take reasonable risks as well. They feel comfortable expressing their thoughts and also sharing their feelings. Students in a compassionate classroom should feel accepted for who they are as an individual and know that they're safe to express that individual identity. I think, and because the kind of outcomes of that are so key to not just well-being but also academic success, it's well worth your time trying to get to that point where you've got these things happening in your classroom. So there's now nodding, so I've left him in there so that you can look back at him. I've spoken a little bit about this already, so I won't go into too much detail, but it's very much that idea that children will do as we do, not as we say, and that especially in this idea of our emotional learning and emotional well-being, it's really important that you're embodying and being a model for this. And I found that in mindfulness education as well. The places where mindfulness education has been very successful are not school environments where educators have gone, we'll do mindfulness because it will be good for children's well-being, and they've played a YouTube clip or a cassette or a CD. It's where staff or a member of staff or the wider team have accepted that this is going to be massively beneficial, spent time learning about it themselves, and chosen to participate and embody the ideas of that thing. Especially mindfulness, I think, if you've got a teacher within the school who's very dedicated to it and is looking at the deeper kind of potential of it, then it has a massive potential to have impact on staff and students as well. The danger of that is that from a very functional point of view is that teacher can become quite isolated and become the kind of the person who's in charge of it, and I don't think that's actually helpful. But having a wider team who are committed to it and then an individual who's specialised in it, I think is great. It creates a model where you can have a group of advocates and it can begin to ingrain itself in the school culture. So the last thing I want to do, just for 5 minutes, and perhaps we'll just do one of these, and then we'll have some questions. So I wanted to give you a practice to take away. So there are two practices that we have. One is a resourcing practice and one is a grounding practice. So I think I'll give you a grounding practice, and you can take this away, and the notes are within the slides, so you can use this yourself. There are also within the slides that I sent to the organisers of this event, there's also an audio file that you can play if you don't want to read this out in your classroom, which is very well read by my colleague. So the idea of grounding is it's a useful sensor motor practice, basically. So it gives children the ability to create safety and bring the mind back to the body. The practice involves bringing attention, so it's very much like mindfulness, but rather than breathing or that kind of what we found is that some children find that breath-led kind of stress relief can be quite fear-inducing and due to our trauma-informed approach, we actually do this in a slightly different way. So I'm going to invite you to take part now, and I'll talk you through it. So what I'd like you to do is sit in an upright position with your feet firmly on the ground, like they're stuck in the mud. And I'd like you to just gently close your eyes, or if you don't want to close your eyes, just perhaps just soften your gaze. And I'd like you to feel your feet supporting the floor and that connection with a solid object, and that's called grounding. Take a calm, slow breath and gently breathe in and out. Keep your shoulders nice and relaxed, let them drop away from your ears. And what I'd like you to do is, when you hear my gentle clap, I'd like you to listen for as long as you can. What I'd like you to do now is bring your mind to a memory or a place or a person, something that makes you feel really happy, gives you peace and safety. I'd like you to focus on that memory or that idea and bring it to your mind as vividly as you can. I'd like you to recall the smells, the colours, and the sounds. If your mind wanders, that's okay. Just really gently bring back your focus back to your memory or your idea. Notice and observe those thoughts and sensations and any emotions that crop up as they come and go. And now just gently bring your mind back to the room. Nice way to do that sometimes, to listen for sounds and concentrate on those as you gently open your eyes. And what I'd like you to do before you get busy again is just think about how you feel right now. What are you noticing? Is it different to how you felt before? We ask children often now, would anyone like to share their thoughts or the thing that their resource, the thing that they focused on? So that's grounding, one of our key practices we do. The other one is resourcing. And the idea is it's a helpful way for children to bring themselves, and that's often used at the beginning and end of lessons to bring them into the moment. So that's the end of my formal presentation now. I wanted to leave 5 minutes and I'll click myself back on so you can see me again for asking questions. Our contact details are there. Please go and have a look at the project websites. All of our resources are free. So please help yourself to anything that's useful to you. And it'd be lovely if anyone had any questions.
Thank you very much, Jimmy. Yeah, it was definitely had to bring myself back to the room. I could have easily just grounded myself away somewhere. I've had a look at the chat box. There aren't anything that's come up at the moment, but if anyone does have any questions, please do type them in, and I'm happy to ask them to Jimmy while we've got a few minutes here at the end. But I just wanted to start off by saying thank you. It's really informative, and I think as all practitioners, as all teachers, or whoever is on here, and if you work in education, compassion is something that everybody, I think, wants in their classroom. They want a classroom climate that encourages that. And I think we do probably all work quite hard to create that anyway, but without perhaps actively thinking that that's what we're doing. They are things that we kind of naturally do.
Absolutely, 100%. I don't think there's a teacher I've met who goes into a classroom to try and create one of hostility and fear. It's, every teacher wants to create compassion. I think the thing that we've grown to understand, and that certainly I've grown to understand, is that There are natural ways that we can do that, such as our demeanor and the way that we approach our work and the way we make it accessible to all. But there are also some skills and tools that we can bring into our lessons, both in our tutor time, in our individual classroom lessons, which can really enhance that. So that are practical things that have come from the world of educational specialists and psychologists and people who are specialists in social emotional learning. And that's really what the two curriculums are weaved around. And actually a little bit of a focus as well on compassion can be really good for children. It can be a good reset. At some of the schools where we've gone in where there's been a specific issue we've tried to tackle, such as antisocial behaviour or kind of bullying, that real jolt of a focus on compassion has helped them to reset and see how far their behaviour has kind of verged towards antisocial and kind of sometimes really negative behaviour. So that's been helpful as well. And sometimes we do encounter that in groups of children we've worked with. Sometimes they're all naturally getting along, and sometimes that doesn't happen. So, but yeah.
No, definitely. And I think, every class you get, you have to kind of, your approach has to be different because different pupils, different groups of children that you have in there. And I think, like you said, it could just be 5 minutes of your day that you actively, do a perhaps grounding exercise, or spend a little time, as you said, looking at kind of the resources that you've got and making it a kind of a focus, and how, as I think all of us would love to have compassion, underpinned throughout our whole curriculum, and especially even more so now. I'd just be quite interested actually to know whether you've kind of adapted anything or any resources due to kind of COVID and the current situation. Is there anything that you've kind of done differently or anything new?
Yeah, there's some fantastic work which has been done about COVID by Professor Barry Gardner, who works at Oxford Brookes University, and he's created something called the recovery curriculum, which is all about, which I really recommend you go away and have a look at. He's done a really short podcast and a blog post about it. It's really worth looking at. But a lot of that is about relationships. So, for me, I think one of the things I've learned through speaking to our schools is that the children have had this kind of structure of relationships taken away. The school is a place where they're often seeing models of really good interconnectedness and relationship building, and teachers modeling that, and children learning in a really positive way how to get along and how relationships can be positive for their lives. And to some extent, and for some children, that's been removed for the last 6 months, and coming back in has been quite unsettling. And that it's really important that we attend to that. And so we've really brought to the fore in some schools that practice on relating to others, and also thinking about spending time thinking about things that we have an activity in our new curriculum which is about what's not been cancelled. And that's quite nice. It's getting children to think about, instead of thinking the cinemas aren't open, I can't go, out for a nice lunch with my family. I can't go and see some of my family in some cases. Instead thinking, what are the things that are really important to me, that make me happy, that are still there? And actually, a lot of the time, it's the things that were there anyway. We just need to refocus on them and let some of the more material things go. So there is an opportunity there as well. So yeah, we've looked at a few of those things, relationships, and thinking positively about what can be gained from where we are now, instead of looking at what we've lost.
And I think even just for adults as well, going into the second lockdown for us and thinking about what hasn't been cancelled, actually, for staff as well, definitely. But thank you so much, Jimmy. I think all of the slides and everything will be shared, so you've got the resources there to have a look. And as you said before, it's free for schools to go on and have a look at those and have those resources on there. So I would definitely encourage you all following this workshop to go and check those out. But thank you. We're bang on time. So you've got a small kind of rest break now before you have your workshop B session this afternoon, and I hope you enjoyed it. And just once again, thank you to Jimmy for this workshop this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.